problem as yet. If we consider entrepreneurship and sustainability, I think it behoves us to try and put up front a little bit of a definition on sustainability entrepreneurship, if you like. I think that sustainability in entrepreneurship refers to basically the integration of environmental and social responsibility into the operations and goals of a business. Just like with any other business, it involves finding ways to minimize the negative impact, the negative externalities of business activities on the planet and its communities. And this while also ensuring long-term viability and success, which of course is primordial for any startup or any early entrepreneur. So there's been for several decades an increasing preoccupation, as we all know, with sustainability and the possible harmful effects of businesses on the social and natural environment. And there's been a lot of studies, both in the field of management and organization studies, and out there in society at large by many international organizations. The issues of environmentalism and social responsibility increasingly appear at the forefront of entrepreneurship and small business research too. Research in social entrepreneurship, for example, focuses on the non-economic aspects of entrepreneurial work and concerns regarding the environmental impacts of operations. GEM actually produced a special report on social entrepreneurship in 2015. But although the increasing salience of the notion of sustainability is relevant to all businesses, arguably it is most challenging for newcomers given their limited knowledge concerning how to navigate expectations regarding sustainability practices. So it's clear that a better understanding is needed on how new entrances to businesses confront and cope with the expectations of striking a balance between sustainability and profitability, such as the impact of, as I said, operations on the natural environment or the promotion of socially responsible practices in day-to-day activities. And for this reason, some 3 years ago now, I mean, we're into our third year, GEM integrated more sustainability-related questions into its core questionnaires. And we have the intention of producing a report looking at the results of the first 2 years of that research. And we're going to do that later on this year in the fall. But to kind of kick off the discussion on entrepreneurship and SDGs, we have decided to run this webinar today, and we've invited two very interesting experts from our network. If we could just change the slide. Srivas Sahasranaman, who is actually the GEM Global Report co-author, and he is attached to the United Kingdom, GEM United Kingdom efforts, and is a professor at the University of Glasgow. And we also have Julien Batley, who is the GEM Spain researcher. He's the director of Laboratory of Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation at UIB. So we're going to kick off with Srivas, who's going to give us a window in, a look in on what he's been discovering from the sustainability questions that we have included in our core questionnaires. And after that, we will listen to Julio. Now, just before we start off, please remember that you can ask questions in the Q&A. You can do that as and when people are speaking. If it's possible, both Srivas and Julio and myself, and also Kevin Anselmo, who kindly organized this webinar, we may be able to respond to you directly in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll also have an interface on Q&A at the end of the presentations. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Tridas and Julio. Tridas first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene, for the introduction. Hello to all. Thank you for being here. Now that you are here, let me start by asking you to use the Q&A function to give your guesses on how far on track are we meeting SDG goals for 2030. Let's say I give you 5-10 seconds for you to throw in some of your guesses on how far on track are we. 30%, 30 to 40%, 70%. Well, we are 15%, only 15% on track to meeting the SDG goals by 2030. And we are more than halfway through in terms of the timeline that has elapsed in achieving. So that tells us how woefully off target are we to meeting these goals by 2030. So the agenda for today's discussion hence is to look at what is it that we are really missing in our efforts. And we have a 2-point agenda. First, we will draw on the global entrepreneurship monitor data to understand some of the global trends when it comes to entrepreneurship and the SDGs. Then we will try to place these trends in the larger narrative around SDGs, understanding what inherent problems the SDGs have, and then talk about what entrepreneurs and the ecosystem could do about all of this. Let's start by looking at the trends. A headline trend that we are finding is that the SDG awareness among entrepreneurs is patchy. To understand this graph, you need to understand 2 terms. One is the total early stage entrepreneurial activity, which is what we describe as the entrepreneurial activity between 0 to 42 months of starting a new venture. And then you have established business ownership, which is the orange bar, which is ventures that are more than 42 months into existence. Now that you've understood these 2 terms, try looking at the graph, and what you will see there is a wide variation when it comes to awareness that entrepreneurs have on the SDGs. You have countries like Italy and Norway where about 50% of the entrepreneurs say that they are aware of the SDGs. But within the same high income economy groups, you have countries like Qatar and Slovenia with less than 20% of the entrepreneurs being aware of the SDGs. And if you look elsewhere in the world, let's say Morocco or Ecuador, it's less than 5% of the entrepreneurs being aware of the SDGs. So clearly, awareness itself of the SDGs among entrepreneurs is patchy. There is a silver lining. Established businesses, which are the ones that are more than 42 months into existence, they are beginning to pull their weight. We find evidence that 1 in 2 established business owners are taking steps to minimize environmental impacts, at least in 36 of the 45 economies where the survey was done. This is positive news when it comes to us meeting targets like SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production, and SDG 13 on climate action. Even though the established businesses are pulling their weight to tackle the SDGs, they are much lesser in number compared to your early stage entrepreneurs. What we see in this graph is you will see that the blue bars are almost across countries much higher than the orange ones. That tells you that the early stage entrepreneurs are much more than the established businesses. And if you look particularly in certain countries, you will find that Latin American countries, let's say Mexico for an example, there is a 10% percentage point gap between the established business ownership and the early stage of new venture activity. This is a cause for concern for us, particularly when it comes to SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth, and SDG 9, which is on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. The other key trend that we find is that female early stage entrepreneurship is catching up with the male early stage entrepreneurial activity. That's quite a good achievement when it comes to SDG 5, which is on gender equality. There is a caveat though on this, which is that the catching up between the early stage male and female entrepreneurship is not yet reflecting into growing businesses. What you see in this graph is the established business ownership rates for female and male entrepreneurs. And here you see that the orange bar across the board almost is much higher than the blue bar. In fact, in countries like South Korea and India, you see that this gap is almost a 10 percentage point gap. So this is not great news when it comes to SDG 5, which is gender equality. So while females are catching up to males when it comes to starting the ventures, they are not really being able to grow their businesses. If you look at why this might be happening, part of the reason could be that the fear of failure tends to be higher among women entrepreneurs compared to men. So in terms of targeting our attention, we might well be needing to look at building confidence, entrepreneurial mindset, and creating support structures for women entrepreneurs to overcome the fear of failure. Another trend that we find is that graduates are more likely to start in 39 of the 45 economies that were surveyed. This tells us that improvements that are being made on SDG 4, which is quality education, has implications on improving entrepreneurial activity within countries. Now that we have understood the trends a bit, let's try and place these trends in the larger discussion around SDGs. Here, I would like to make the case that SDGs have an inherent SDG problem, which are problems of structure, data, and governance. We will delve a bit into understanding what these problems are and then think about what entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurship ecosystem like ours could do about this. Starting off with the problems of structure. These are twofold: how to reach and how to coordinate or communicate. Let's look at an example to understand this problem. In a piece of research that we did using the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data within the UK, we find that there is a clear double disadvantage for entrepreneurship. This double disadvantage comes because of the intersection between gender and deprivation. What the study essentially tells us is that female in deprived areas of the UK find it a lot more harder to start new ventures compared to other intersections, which is, let's say, male in a deprived area or females in non-deprived areas. So it's a clear double disadvantage, which tells us the problem of reach and access when it comes to SDGs and entrepreneurship. Let's look elsewhere in terms of geography, particularly a case from Guatemala, where there was an effort which involved entrepreneurs working with civil society organizations to implement a clean cook stove initiative. The advantages of a clean cook stove is very obvious. It improves health, it improves air quality, no questions asked. But when it came to the adoption of these cook stoves, they found that the adoption was quite poor. Delving into why this was happening, they figured out that it was because these clean cook stoves were ignoring the practical and social realities of the place. The traditional cook stoves, which they used to use, was a source of heat and light. This meant it became a social gathering point for the family and the community. But when these new improved bookstores came into play, they ignored these practical and social realities. This tells us the issue that SDG entrepreneurs face while implementing solutions, where if they lack communication and local embeddedness, despite all good intentions, adoption and success of some of these solutions might not come to fruition. Moving on, let's understand the problems of data. These are twofold again: what we know and how we value it. We already looked at the evidence at the starting of this presentation, saying that the awareness itself of SDGs among entrepreneurs is lacking. That's part of the data problem. If you don't know something, how do you expect to act on it? That's a fundamental problem in itself. The other data problem is how do you quantify social value? So let me ask you a question. How much value is there in saving the spotted owl? Well, we don't know. How much value is there in offering companionship to the elderly? Well, we don't know. While impact measurement metrics have improved over the years, in a number of social and environmental metrics, we still do not have clear estimates of measurement. And this has direct implications for the entrepreneurs because they are not being able to measure on certain metrics and then report that to their stakeholders like investors and the government. So these are the data problems of SDGs. Then they are about problems of governance, which are around weak institutions and power differences. Let's again look at a couple of examples to understand this problem. In a piece of research that we did, again using the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data, we find that founders are reluctant to make investments, personal investments, towards a social venture if they are operating in countries of weak rule of law. This tells us that in weak institutions, the confidence that founders have in putting money towards SDG-oriented ventures is much lesser. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that SDG entrepreneurs, while focusing on solutions around SDG problems, they often have to deal with the inherent power differences in the community and the inequalities that come with it. To give you an example, in Colombia, entrepreneurs were working with waste pickers community. But they found that these waste pickers were having to fight with the existing elites within the power structure because these elites, which involve corporates, local authorities, and media, they were restricting and barring access for these waste pickers to the waste itself. So these entrepreneurs were not just creating a product or service offer, but they were having to first give voice and dignity to these waste pickers in the first place. So these are problems of governance around power differences that we need to tackle if you are an SDG entrepreneur. Now that we have understood these problems, I would like to close out by making a 6-point call to action checklist on how we might address the structured data governance, the SDG problem of the SDGs. First, universities need to inculcate more of SDG aspects within their curriculum. This will improve SDG skills. But they shouldn't stop at that. It's important that they go beyond it and get students to engage with real life SDG challenges. To give you an example, it might be rural electrification in Rwanda or water sanitation in Malawi. That would inculcate SDG mindsets into people. If that is coming through, it would help create social impact focused spin-outs coming out from our universities. In fact, as we speak, there is an ongoing effort in Scotland where a separate framework is being created for these social impact spin-outs to come. And this pathway is being considered as being independent in its approach from how you would commercialize a technology-focused spin-outs. In addition to all of this, universities, along with global research networks like the GEM, need to work more on data collection efforts and research efforts that will provide us evidence-backed insights into how we could tackle the SDGs, how effective are our current measures, and what we might improve around it. So that's the call for action for the universities. For SDG entrepreneurs, like we saw in the example of the waste picker community, it's important that these entrepreneurs are conscious of building dignity and voice within the communities that they operate in. Second, the SDG entrepreneurs would leverage on digital commons-based efforts to tackle issues of market visibility and access to resources. In fact, there are efforts ongoing in emerging markets like India and Brazil, where entrepreneurs are engaging with digital public infrastructure efforts to use digital commons-based platforms to solve for open commerce, digital payment type solutions. We need more of that coming. And just as we saw in the example from Guatemala, in all these efforts, it's important that local role models are created and local embedding of the solutions becomes the core focus. For the entrepreneurship ecosystem, we need quite a bit of capital. $4 trillion to be specific, going by last year's estimates, if we are to meet the SDG targets by 2030. And this capital shouldn't be just any capital. It needs to be predominantly in the form of patient capital, as in long-term capital. That means philanthropy and alternate sources of finance take prominence in our efforts. We also saw earlier on that there is a big gap when it comes to established ventures by females compared to established ventures by males. So the other call for action for the ecosystem is to focus on venture growth support, particularly for female-led ventures. Hopefully, taking a mix of these actions and others, accelerate more of our progress from the 15% on target to a lot more of these goals being achieved by 2030. I will close my presentation at that. Thank you so much and looking forward to follow-up discussions.
Thank you so much, Srivas. Really interesting insights. I am going to pick up just one question now because it pertains to a clarification, and I think it's interesting to do the clarification. The question is, what is the difference between SDG entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs? And that said, I think it is important to note that where social entrepreneurship or SDG entrepreneurship is concerned, it is a circumstance where I'll ask you in a moment to define it better, Srivas, but where the social impact is primordial in the design of the company. And it is important for me to outline that GEM actually is serving all entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs also in the mainstream, that are carrying out businesses, are designing businesses and implementing businesses that do not necessarily have a social or environmental objective, but that take account of that and those SDGs in their design. But maybe you could clarify a bit further the difference between the SDG and the social entrepreneur.
Absolutely, I kind of agree with your thoughts there, Eileen. So social entrepreneurship typically is you're starting with a social impact mission and vision as the core right at the start of it. While if you think about SDG entrepreneurship in the definition, it might not all be just people starting with that. It might be people that are starting with a, let's say, general commercial vision, but within that, they're ensuring that they are minimizing the environmental risk or increasing social impact, all of that. So SDG entrepreneurship has a more broader ambit in terms of its definition compared to just social entrepreneurship.
And it's inclusive, more so inclusive of the environment, I feel. The social is okay. Of course, we know that environmental impact has social repercussions, but I think that SDGs actually encompass the environmental aspect very squarely. So, okay, thank you very much, Julio. Can I pass over to you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Eileen. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here as well. Interested, committed to sustainable development, maybe infatuated with the topic. Well, I'll be talking about the case of Spain. We are, in GEM special case, we have more than 30,000 responses, which is noteworthy achievement. It's a very vibrant and active network. I'm honored to be part of it network. I know the Spanish one. Basically, as you see, this year we have included, let's say, in the national report, a section dedicated to SDGs, which emphasizes on commitment or interest, and maybe this perception that the topic is extremely important and will be even become more and more important over the years. And in this report that I show here, we basically the results, as you can see, basically are aligned with what Dr. Raman mentioned. I mean, we're in level B, for instance, in terms of priority given to SDGs, we are in the middle of the level B. In awareness, we are, as it was shown, a bit bigger, a bit above level B countries, and more or less the middle of level A. And is let's say just a report that shows that we are doing well, but what is well? What is good? 60% of the new entrepreneurs have identified SDG as a priority. Is that good? Which is the result? 60%. Is that good? Well, I don't know. I think that we should and could do far better. I mean, who wants to initiate an adventure not moved, not triggered by something that goes beyond them? I guess we can do better. I think, and our role is to help in that process. We have a significant opportunity for advancement. Next slide. We have a closer look at the results. Well, we see a similar pattern to the one that was shown, and basically, you see that measures to maximize the impact, environmental impact, is bigger than social one, which is something that maybe should not surprise us, but to some extent it does. I mean, are social issues less important than environmental ones? Why this is happening? It's a matter of regulation, external pressure, as you mentioned afterwards. That's something that we don't know for sure the reason. There are many whys. The more data we got, the more whys emerge. And here we'll try to give some clues or some options to understand that. New entrepreneurs are more aware of SDGs in general, but entrepreneurs in charge of consolidated companies have more orientation to action, more measures about that. That is another pattern that, well, is not surprising, but, well, it's something that maybe we should try to have an impact in a positive way over time. Here I make questions. I share with you some questions. Is maybe this result basically an opportunity for you, among others, to help new entrepreneurs to identify new ventures in relation to social and environmental impact by signaling them, by identifying venture opportunities in these fields. And why, especially young, especially new entrepreneurs, ignore to a large extent social impact in terms of measures. I think that what is mentioned, the next slide is also comment. Obviously, action always speaks louder than intentions. It's easier to talk and consider priorities and social. But I guess that, well, we have not achieved this state in which actions are equal, let's say, intentions. And what can we do that to be helpful? Basically, here what is mentioned is that the data from Spain, 7 out of 10 recent entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, consider social implications are in their decisions, which is above the other sections of age. But obviously the percentage of action among these people falls in a way that, well, that probably maybe indicates that they need some kind of help. Why this is happening? Well, what kind of help can we provide, if any? I was mentioning that this opportunity to add new elements, new identities, new products to GEM. I mean, it's clear that they need not only venturing business opportunities regarding social and environmental impact, but also best practices. I mean, are there low cost, easy, let's say, policies or actions, measures to incorporate social issues and environmental one. Social is, as I mentioned, quite remarkable, the need to help the field to their business design. Well, I think GEM is researched, we know, basically is recognized by research, and its production is used by policymakers, by researchers. I think that to a less extent to by entrepreneurs, and maybe social, especially social entrepreneurship, social innovation, which are not mainstream yet, which are not marginal, but to some extent alternative, different to the mainstream entrepreneurship. It's a field that for some of us in Spain, which have created also social innovation, social entrepreneurship, UNUS, social business centers, that's a special moment, a very good one to grow in these new directions for them. And well, basically it is the need to help to young entrepreneurs. Next slide. It's also applicable to help in fields in which external pressure is not as important as in other fields. We see here that, well, in terms of sector, extractive industries have at least more concern about environmental issues. It's a matter of regulation, that's clear. 6 out of 10 in the extractive sector have taken measures to minimize the environmental impact, and 7 out of 10 in the case of consolidated ones. And that means, in your opinion, that probably the much of what is happening in relation to SDGs is a response to external factors, is exogenous. I mean, especially in environmental issues, and many countries, there's more content, messages, and information, news about environmental impact than social impact, which is maybe explains this gap that we mentioned previously about social impact in relation to environmental one. And well, that's something that, in our opinion, it could create new opportunities. My point, line with the presentation that Dr. Sahas Manaman mentioned, is that probably it's a slide. Well, the next slide is about the size of entrepreneurial initiatives, and we see that in all of them the gap in consideration and action is the same. Consolidated companies, maybe because of feeling much pressure by regulations, by the media, have more action. But something that is also in Spain, in the case of Spain, there are no differences in terms of gender relation to SDGs. And I was saying that maybe one opportunity that arises in our minds when we explore these results is that maybe we need to have more information. We need to expand, let's say, the scope of data that we collect. So, my point, next slide, I will finish with that, is that basically there is a need to collect and have more information. Obviously, social and environmental projects will keep growing because of many factors that are here mentioned: global awareness, sportive regulation, corporate responsibility, and some others. But I guess that it's not only that they will grow, probably a new perspective of business is emerging, and it's still early stage of development, but something is changing. The growth of social entrepreneurship, communitary projects, social innovation, and new hybrid options also changes that were already mentioned. The ecosystem for social entrepreneurs is a different universe, and there are sometimes no links or connections between the innovation and the startup and corporate innovation ecosystem and the social one. That's something that we are feeling, we are touching every day with social entrepreneurs. It's a different kind of people, and they don't have this connection with the collaboration. And well, our suggestion to finish my presentation is that maybe we should explore further some elements regarding the structure of these projects related to SDGs, because many corporations and established companies are just incorporating their priorities, social and environmental topics. But well, some of them, as mentioned, take it to the core of the business, and that's something that it will grow for many reasons, because of the values of new generations, and maybe it's an opportunity for them to include new elements, their questionnaires, new variables, and going deeper into the black box, let's say, of the structure of the company. Is that a social entrepreneurship project? Is that social innovation? How do you try to integrate the business and social impact? How do you measure your own success? Which are your new alliances or new collaborations that you got pioneer work with new sectors or new activities? What defines social innovation? Well, this kind of questions may be something that it could be included together with business model that was already mentioned. I mean, that's something that normally doesn't it's not part of the questionnaires that we use. Well, it's a complicated thing. I'm fully aware of the additional complications that this entail. But I guess that, well, that's another option. Right now, we are talking several regional directors here in Spain to this fall to initiate research call to present a project on social entrepreneurship and social innovation. Incorporating these kind of factors maybe can be, we hope that it can be the beginning of something, because the importance, it's even surprising for us, the number of the campus, outside the campus, of course, the number of people that they want to get involved, they want to become entrepreneurs, but not the typical entrepreneur. That's the typical answer that we receive, and it's nice, and it implies that, well, they want to create, but they don't want to be considered typical entrepreneurs. What does it mean? Well, maybe they are social innovators, they are social community entrepreneurs, and well, GEM, I think, should have a role in pioneering this kind of research. And well, that's basically the things that I want to share. I'm fully aware that some of these recommendations move us, or more than move us, imply, well, let's say, evolving in terms of identity. Are we, as I mentioned, a research production entity, or are we we are here in order to go beyond that, creating producing transfer in a more practical and oriented to entrepreneurs? But that's a discussion that is too big to me for me. But anyway, that's perception and maybe social impact. And I emphasize social more than environmental. I hope that you understand. Probably it's the perfect opportunity to explore that. And that's what I had in mind to share today with you. It's a pleasure. Sorry if I didn't.
Thank you so much, Julio. Very interesting perspective and thoughts on how GEM indeed might evolve into the future. Just to respond very quickly on those points, what GEM has tried to avoid doing is being overly prescriptive. So, in other words, what we do is we take our research, which is actually mostly funded by policymakers, and we show them the results, and we do a certain amount of analysis on the top level, but then it is up to the policymaker to carry that into implementation. So it's a fine line, because we have about 150 universities and research institutions that work with us. I think it behoves also those research institutions to carry that into their teaching and other areas. Whilst GEM remains kind of quite independent in terms of putting the research out there, that doesn't mean that we can't actually develop some useful instruments for entrepreneurs. And so then from that point of view, I think actually it's really interesting to explore that further into the future. Again, I think it's also very interesting for people to know who don't know GEM that we have about 350 or so specialists in entrepreneurships that are out there. So the impact overall is going to be huge, no matter what we do, even if we just put the research out there, because all of those people will go in different areas of research and also other walks of life, even if not now, later, will bring the impact into the world. We have actually some very juicy questions, I think. I think the first one we have here is if we're trying to measure social and economic value for social enterprises, how should we do it accurately? Srivas, you kind of answered that in your presentation, saying, you know, it's actually very difficult to get your head around that. And look, having worked in sustainability, corporate sustainability, practically all of my professional life, you know, we've made headway on measuring environmental impact and value, but the social side is much less tangible, you know. And these things evolve. I have no doubt that ways and means of measuring that value and that impact will be eventually evolved. But for now, most of the headway has been in the environmental dimension.
Sí, ¿cuándo podemos hablar?
General pollution, etc. Srivas, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, totally agree. I will probably take that question along with the question and subsequent list, which talks about the SDG mindsets from an online business standpoint.
Yes.
I think there are intersections there. Right?
Okay.
For an online business, measurement is easier because you're probably tracking a lot more of things, right? So number of minutes that people are spending on Zoom, or number of less times that they would have had to come to an office. So all of these small micro tasks that happen within a venture, now it's possible for us to track it in a much more better way if you're an online business and integrate all of that into metrics of measurement. And I think there's a lot of progress that's being made around that space, where one is your usual carbon accounting, carbon footprint sort of measurements, and the other is measurements being made around well-being, measurements being made about mental health, and all of this contribute to different SDGs as well. So you can, if you're an online business and you're tracking a lot of your micro tasks that your employees are doing, it's possible for us to create these sorts of metrics and see how the venture is targeting the SDGs.
Yeah, Srivas, I would even go further to say it depends on your online business, because if you are fully online, but eventually at some point a product or a service is being delivered to somewhere in the world, and you are sourcing for that product, or you know, you are actually evolving that service in different ways along your entire value chain, as it is now called. The impacts that you are having go beyond just the online part of your business. It really, even though you're online, you still have an entire value chain to take account of. So the impact, most companies worth their salt today are looking at the entire value chain, and that includes the online businesses. And so, you know, for example, if you have a lot of parcels being delivered, you know, what's happening with the waste? I mean, that's a very, very important question today, given the extent to which customers and consumers are moving towards ordering in rather than going out to shops and buying their goods. So, yeah, just take that into account. Now, we have another question here. If you are looking at, was it asked in the survey if the established entrepreneurial firm saw itself as a family business or not, and if any comparisons could be done? Who would like to take that question? Yeah.
First go on it. I mean, so what we have in the survey is we ask for the motivations of individuals to start the venture. And within that, one of the motivations that we explore is whether they are trying to continue a family tradition. So that's the way by which we are kind of capturing whether it's a family business that's ongoing, or whether they are motivated by wealth or trying to change the world or have other motives to it. So that's the one approach that
I mean, there is, it's, sorry, go ahead, Julio, yes.
No, I mean, it's not the same, yeah, but it's a proxy. It's a proxy, and it's the only question that we are asking here.
I mean, family business in general have the, I suppose, almost luxury of being able to think longer term than non-family businesses, and certainly listed companies. And that is really very clear in the research around family businesses. So they just have a different mindset, a more longer term mindset, and this definitely fits into the sustainability mindset much better. Actually, we have a question, which I don't know whether you, Julio, might be interested in this, because you're looking at ways and means of accelerating the SDGs through the integration of different activities. So how might we accelerate SDGs through the integration of different types of entrepreneurship, open innovation, crowd inventing, crowdsourcing, crowd researching, etc. Do you have some views on that?
Nice. I will try, of course. Actually, answering this is sharing one of the obsessions that I got. I was in Mallorca, in Balearics, one of the creators of a network of social entrepreneurs. And it was surprising. I didn't expect it. Some of them are social entrepreneurs, social innovators. Some of them are almost activists with this sort of intention to have an income from that. But well, sometimes it was surprising in practically all the cases, the lack of insight in relation to innovation, to business models, basically, and the lack of connection with all the agents from the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem, as I mentioned previously. And well, the obsession that I was mentioning is the need to create bridges and connections. Of course, there are corporates that could be more than happy to collaborate with some social innovators, and technology companies that would like to have activists or people, innovators, social innovators that want to develop some kind of services and products that can have this impact. But the connections are not made, and there are different worlds, different communities, and in answer to the question, I guess that the most efficient, necessary step to accelerate the growth of these projects is creating these connections. And first of all, you read the need to incorporate. Another of my obsessions is Spain, at least, and in Balearics particularly, where we have some of the most important hotel chains and tourism technology, tourism companies in world level, but some of them have no connection whatsoever with the startups, not at all. It's something quite incredible. With social innovation, with innovators as well, entrepreneurs. And well, it's a matter of connection. I think it's a step. What I was going to say is that maybe the first step is to create a need, not in social entrepreneurs or so on, but in corporations. Why do you need this young talent, typically collaboration with people doing these kind of things, strange things, people from generations, probably not yours. And well, that's a task to be done by someone. We try for the universities. I think is one of the roles that we have. Yeah, I think it's like that.
All right. We have another question, actually about GEM. from Stephen Hill, who is our author, the main author of our global report. Says, how can GEM itself work more sustainably? So it's an interesting one, that one, because actually GEM was online, at least in its core, well before COVID. People work from home on the core team, and we carry out, and in fact, since COVID, we have moved to having all board meetings online, all meetings, between people online. The only exception to that is the launch of our global report, which takes place in February of every year. Actually, it will take place in Bilbao in Spain in 2025, and we're very much looking forward to that. But how can GEM itself work more sustainably? I think I mentioned the outreach of GEM. We've had more than 120 economies participate in GEM research since 1999. We're 25 years old. We have hundreds of researchers working with us. We have probably about 170, between 150 and 170 institutions working with us. And as I said, hopefully the impact is going far and wide through our vast network of researchers. I think I have to actually end with that. There's some other interesting questions there, and we'll consider whether we can send them to you, send you responses independently of the webinar. But thank you very much for your interest in being here. I will always do this, which is to pitch for anybody out there that knows a team or a potential team that might join GEM. We're particularly interested in developing countries, emerging economies at the moment. But we welcome just about any national team if you think that you can help us towards making GEM even more robust than it is. We currently have this year about 61 teams that are participating in the research. So that's really good. We've started to really increase since a fairly difficult period over COVID, where we stayed stagnant, but we did not increase. Now we started to increase again. So please reach out to us. And then we will be, as I said, producing a sustainability entrepreneurship report in the fall of this year. If you're interested in sponsoring or being associated with that report, please also reach out, or if you know of an organization that may be interested, please also reach out. And I would like to finally thank you very, very much, Srivas and Julio, for taking the time to be with us today and seizing the questions, giving us the presentation, and hopefully this will be
It's 9 hours.
Interesting dialogue between GEM pioneers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks to everyone.